Discussion items, student assignment revisions or suggestions under 7A, Mr. Jacobs and others. Oh, here it is, right there. I need a holster.
The other way.
You're going to outnumber us here pretty soon. But that's okay. Take your time, but anytime you're ready, we're ready to go.
Okay. Superintendent Hargens, Chairman Imhoff, and the Board of Education. We're here tonight in a discussion item with you about some recommendations we have on student assignment. Of course, I know you know everyone that's on the team here, and there's a lot of team members behind us here, and we appreciate the opportunity to come before you again. We've been in front of you many times in the past several months, and we appreciate the leadership you've given us and us working through a new student assignment plan, working through real important what we like to call these is improvements in the student assignment plan, modifications to the student assignment plan. And we'd like to go through those this evening with you in a PowerPoint, and I'd like to begin immediately.
Go ahead.
4 main recommendations that we'd like to recommend to you for the next school year. We'd like to establish a new diversity guideline based on census block groups for elementary schools. We'd like to include ESL students in an elementary schools diversity index. We'd like to include kindergarten students in a schools diversity index, which means they would only have to apply one time. Current kindergarten students will remain at the same school for the first grade. That would create stability in the system where a 6-year-old would not have to apply again for the next school year. We'd like to talk to you tonight about our recommendations for elementary clusters. We've brought to you in the past 3 or 4 cluster configurations. We've talked to you about the 6 cluster configuration, the 12 cluster configuration. We've talked about a 13 cluster configuration, and our staff has looked at many other cluster configurations, and we've done extensive research in this area. What are the benefits? First of all, the benefits are we're going to use a 2009 American Community Survey census information. We've changed a lot in 10 years in this community. We've grown nearly 7%, or almost 50,000 people. Our communities and our neighborhoods have grown. We've expanded east and southeast quite extensively. So we need to recognize that in student assignment, and that's something that needs to be looked at continuously. We need to recognize existing diversity within smaller geographic areas. I think that's very important. First of all, the A and the B they're just too broad of areas. They don't identify the diversity that exists across Jefferson County, and that's very important. The other new benefits, each cluster would fall within the diversity guideline, and that's very important to us. No cluster has a majority of students who live in a Category 1 block group. And Dina shortly will go through the block groups and give you the diversity index in those groups. More students could be assigned closer to home, potentially reducing their bus ride time. and that's been real important to the group. Stability's been number one, stability and consistency, but students assigned closer to home, still maintaining our diversity index, and potentially reducing bus ride time are very important goals. Current clusters and boundaries remain the same. And the reason we would recommend that for the upcoming school year is because of two reasons. First of all, when we study the reconfigure the clusters, we'd like to do that with a magnet review. We think that's very important. And secondly, next year is the last year of grandfathering, both in elementary school and middle school. So if we maintain the 6 clusters for next year, the year after, in year 13, 14, we would be able to begin the school year without another layer of grandfathering and with a very strong magnet review, which we've talked about in the past. Next year, opportunities for magnets remain the same. We need to look at our magnets. We need to look at the ones that are very attractive, and we need to help the ones that aren't very attractive right now. We need to really look at it and see what we can do to help them. Transportation routes to daycare centers will remain the same. And working with the public, we have found that daycare is very important to our families, and it's very important to us. Additional buses will not be needed for next year. We won't have to purchase any additional equipment. The fleet we have now in place will take care of all of our children. Additional grandfathering will not be required for next year. So staying with this cluster plan, we will not have to add grandfathering on to a plan that already has grandfathering into it till it's eliminated. Those are some of the benefits. Dina?
I'd like to share tonight how we would define diversity and how it differs from the current plan. The definition of diversity would be based on the most recent census data, which shows that changes in our community have occurred over the last 10 years. Our population has grown and shifted. As Jack mentioned, we have about a 7% increase in the last 10 years, and our minority population has increased. This new definition of diversity would also be based on block groups. In Jefferson County, we have about 570 block groups, which are smaller geographic areas than what we currently use to define diversity, which are larger school resides areas. The factors that would make up diversity would be the same as they are in the current plan. We would be looking at household income, race, and educational attainment of the total population. But what this new definition will allow us to do is to more accurately describe the diversity which exists in those smaller communities that has occurred over the last 10 years with the new census data. This plan would designate each block group as a category 1, 2, or 3. And so what that would look like visually is you would see a map on the screen of Jefferson County with the 570 block groups. Those block groups in red represent category 1, in orange represent category 2, and in purple represent the block groups that are considered category 3. And so when you look at a comparison of our current definition of diversity and this new proposal, what you'll see is that the current plan has the district divided into 2 areas, Area A and Area B. What this new definition of diversity would allow us to do is recognize smaller pockets of diversity within those block groups that we can't currently identify or recognize now. And when we look at defining diversity according to those 3 factors, each block group, again, would be considered a 1, 2, or 3. When we look at the factor of income, a category 1 block group would be those block groups that on average have less than $42,000. Category 2 would be those block groups with $42,000 to $62,000, and Category 3 would be those block groups with an average of $62,000 or more. In terms of looking at the percent white, Category 1 block groups would be less than 73% white. Category 2 block groups would be between 73 and 88% white. And Category 3 would be those block groups that have 88% or more of the total population as being white. In terms of adult educational attainment, that scale runs from 1 to 6, a 6-point scale, with 1 being grade 8 education or less, and a score of 6 would be a graduate degree or higher. So Category 1 block groups would be those block groups with up to an associate's degree. Category 2 would be those block groups whose educational attainment is some college beyond an associate's degree. And Category 3 would be those block groups whose average educational attainment is up to a bachelor's degree and beyond. So we would use those 3 factors and combine them so that each block group is a 1, 2, or 3. And when we talk about a school's diversity index, a school's enrollment would be comprised of students who reside in block groups from Categories 1, 2, and 3. So we're recommending that we have a diversity guideline where the diversity index for a school shall be between 1.4 and 2.5. And when we look at this on a school example, we have these 2 schools, School 1 and 2, both have 100 students in their enrollment. The first school, 50% of those students enrolled live in Category 1, 33% live in Category 2, and 17% live in Category 3. So their average diversity index for that school is a 1.7. School 2 has 15% of students who live in a Category 1, 45 who live in a Category 2, and 40 who live in a Category 3. So you can see in School 2, they have less students from Category 1, more students from Category 3, so their diversity index is a little bit higher at a 2.3. And I'll now turn it over to Kathy to talk a little bit more about how the index or the diversity of our different groups of students is represented in our plan.
I'd like to speak to recommendation 2 and 3 that Jack previously mentioned. The first one, including the elementary ESL students in our diversity guideline. By including our ESL, or our English as our second language students, we recognize the diversity that these students bring to our schools. We also, by including our ESL students, we now also recognize the increasing multiracial diversity that exists in our district, and we acknowledge our growing ESL population. Recommendation 3, including kindergarten students in our diversity index. That says that our current kindergarten students will remain at the same school for the first grade unless they move or unless they apply to and are accepted at another school. This means they will have the same opportunity to apply to a magnet school or magnet program or an optional program, though they do not have to reapply to stay at the school that they are currently in. Also, our incoming 2012-13 kindergarten students, when they apply for kindergarten, they will also get to remain at the same school where they are attending for the first grade. But they also will be able to apply for a magnet school or a magnet program or an optional program, or if they move, then they would go and apply at their current new resides cluster. This recommendation has received lots of support in our community feedback meetings, and we presented it to the elementary principals, and it received support there as well. How does this help our families? Barbara will address that.
The revised definition of diversity recognizes the smaller geographic areas of diversity in our district and allows more students to attend a school closer to home than are able to under the current plan. In our analysis of this recommendation, we've identified more than 2,000 elementary students, those are current kindergarten and through 4th grade students, who could possibly attend a school closer to home if capacity exists, and the assignment would enhance the diversity at the closer schools. So we did a little map to show where those children live, and you can see that they live in all 6 clusters. We did a statistical analysis and determined that 46% of these students are white, 36% of these students are African American, and the remaining 17% of these students are other minorities. And this is similar to the demographic makeup of our student body. So it shows that we are reaching quite a large number of students. I'd like to give you one example of a student that we might be able to move closer to home under this definition of diversity. There is a student who lives in the boundary for Fern Creek Elementary School, and so currently that is an Area A boundary area, and the student is considered living in Area B. And she's assigned to Indian Trail Elementary School, which is in Area A. So the student who lives in Area B assigned to an Area A and enhances the diversity at Indian Trail Elementary School. And she currently has about a 40-minute bus ride and has to change buses at the depot. Under the proposed diversity plan, this student lives in a block group that is still in the Fern Creek boundary, but it is a block group that is in Category 1. So this student would actually enhance the diversity at Fern Creek Elementary School because they can take more students who live in Block Group 1, and Indian Trail does not need additional students who live in Block Group 1. So it would be a help to both schools if this student were assigned to Fern Creek Elementary. And if she were assigned to Fern Creek Elementary, she would have about a 9-minute bus ride to Fern Creek Elementary, so that would save on transportation time. There are similar stories for many of the children that you see represented by dots on this map. And if the board chooses to adopt this plan, we would begin counseling with these families and talking with them about their options or opportunities under the new plan. And now we're going to have some folks from technology come and talk with us about some of the enhancements that we're doing to make information more available to our families.
So I'm going to talk.
This is Josh.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to you again about the enhanced school finder. A lot of parents are familiar with the current school finder system that we have, and they've used that in the past, but I was tasked with creating a more informative and intuitive interface for that system. And this would really be the front end for whatever student assignment plan we have. So right now it's using our A/B system, and we use the 1, 2, 3, or whatever we decide. And someone mentioned earlier that that would be useful information to have here if you typed in your address and it told you what area you were in. And that's definitely something that we have access to that we can put on this site. So I'm going to search my own address and perform a search here, and you will see a lot of the information that's on the old School Finder site. Just kind of broke that out and put it here for you to view what you need. We show the elementary information. Your reside school is right there, and your reside school phone number is there. If we decided to, we could make that bigger, bolder. I think that's important information to people, the elementary resides. And if I scroll down, I can click OK and make this go away and see that I've mapped all of these points that were my school choices based on my address. And I've got all of the functionality of the mapping controls that we're used to with Google Maps, with Bing Maps. This one happens to be using Bing right now. I can hover over and I've got points, links to the websites for those schools. If I want to get more information about them, I just click there. And I'll scroll down here and you can see we have separate tabs for elementary, middle, and high. If I were to switch to the high tab, it just remaps everything for the high schools, middle, elementary. And then at the bottom, we've got a list of all of those schools that were my school choices based on my cluster. The first column has the distance from my address to each one of those schools. The second tells me the type of school it is, and if I scroll down to the options and magnet schools, it tells me what kind of options and magnet schools those are. Again, we have hyperlinks to those schools' web pages where you can go get more information about them. And the newest features If I click on any of the schools, there's a link to get directions in the first column. I click there and it actually maps out the route from my address to that particular school and shows me turn-by-turn directions on how to get there. Again, more useful information. And also, you may have noticed there's some pie charts here, and for now those are placeholders for metrics that this committee is going to decide what kind of information parents might want to see there that helps them make informed decisions. And this is scheduled to be completed by the end of this month, so whatever plan we have.
Brent?
Okay, very quickly, I wanted to go over some of the functionality of our new routing system and GPS. I know you all have heard us talk about this for quite some time now. There are some screenshots here that just show a simple example. Basically, on the map, you have a set of bus stops, and after transportation staff have worked with school staff and parents to identify where the students are going to be picked up or dropped off and looked at safety concerns, once those students are assigned to stops, we can input these stops into the routing system, so we'll have a student count and destination. We can then set parameters for each vehicle. We can put ride time as a priority or shortest distance. And then we can also set constraints in regard to ride time. Do we want to fill the bus up and go to school one time, or do we want to pick up a group of students, drop them off at school, and then go back and do a double run? Once we set all the parameters, we can then route. The system will use the appropriate number of vehicles to pick up those stops, and you will get a map of the route with the number of students at each bus stop. We can zoom in and look at that on top of the aerial photography, or we can switch to the street map and you can see the same route with the student count at each bus stop. The driver then can receive a printout. Eventually, when we have this in place, they'll get the left and right turns for that route with the student count at each bus stop. And then eventually, we'll be able to give them a student roster at each stop that has a student name, address, phone number, and the school that student attends. And also, as part of this system, we have automatic vehicle location. So the GPS on each vehicle will send a signal, and we can go back, we can look at the vehicle live, or we can go back and look at historical data. And we'll also tie into some of the electronics on the bus. We will tie into the stop arm, the amber lights and the red lights, so we can see those events when we go back and look, and we'll know exactly when a bus made a stop. And there are several reports that we can pull from this system. This is just a sample of a ride time report, and we can look at each student and quickly get their actual ride time, and we can set limits on the front end when we go to do this analysis. We currently do a ride time report, but it does take quite some time. We have to do a lot of that manually. Thank you.
And to conclude this evening, student assignment encompasses many things. I'm sitting here making a list of all the things that student assignment encompasses. It runs through the entire school system. It's very important to our families. It affects attendance, transportation, magnet applications, safety. It affects a lot of things. And what we like to think is a lot of these recommendations we're making tonight are improvements and modifications. First of all, we feel like that this plan more accurately describes the diversity which exists in communities, which with the new census is very important, allowing more students to attend a school closer to home, potentially reducing ride time. This recommendation uses updated census information. We've changed drastically in 10 years. Keeping the current cluster arrangement provides continuity, does not require additional grandfathering. When we do adjust the clusters, we need to study our magnets quite extensively, and we would like to move forward and Next year is the last year of grandfathering for the fifth graders and the last year grandfathering for the eighth graders. So we will not look at another cluster configuration until we complete our grandfathering. I think that's very important. I think this is and the community felt very strongly about this. Kindergarten students do not have to reapply for first grade, and that provides stability. A lot of families are very happy with their schools, and the first graders want to stay where they're at, where they're happy. The increased use of technology, and we just showed you a couple of things, will enhance information available to parents, assisting them in making informed decisions. We need to have clarity with our parents. They need to be able to understand our plan, understand the resources that we have, and be able to, go online, look at their transportation, go online and look at their school choices, apply online. All these things we're working on. We feel like these are operational things that are very important to this district. No additional buses will be required to implement this plan. We're not moving into a plan where we're going to need more buses and need more grandfathering. We're moving to a plan where the equipment we have will suffice. And that wraps up our short presentation to you this evening.